Hi, everybody. My name is Harold Strong. I'm president of Medical Innovation Collaborative, and today we are in for a treat with our Medical Innovation Collaborative conversations today. Today we have Cynthia Culmo, who is a consultant quality for pharmaceutical industry, among other things, and she's here to have a conversation. We're excited about that. Cynthia, the opportunity today is to help me understand the work you do. Historically, I've done a lot of innovation district stuff, a lot of collaborative stuff, but I've never gotten into the weeds associated with the exact work you do. So welcome, happy to have you here. Look forward to the conversation.
Hello, Harold. Thank you. It's good to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Wonderful. So the format of today's conversation is like all the others. We have 5 questions. Those 5 questions relate to your origin story, who your customer is, what their unmet need is, what do you think the gap in the market is, and ultimately, what do you do for fun? So with that, tell us about how you got into what led up to your consulting and some of the tremendous work you did in advance of that.
Okay, so I originated as a professional, as a pharmacist, and I practiced clinical pharmacy for several years before I went into the enforcement side. And that's when I became director for drugs and medical devices in Texas. And it was in that position, I was a fully commission credentialed FDA official. And I did that for 12 years. And then also, I then went into the industry. I worked with Abbott for almost 10 years and then transferred to a biologics company. And 5 years ago, I moved over into the consulting side.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So who is your customer? And I know that is like asking how much water's in the ocean, but your focus, who are you working with as a customer?
Right. So primarily as the manufacturers of drugs, devices, and biologics. There are other product entities that I get involved with too, dietary supplements and cannabis and CBD and pharmacy compounding. But primarily it's the manufacturers and then also wholesale distributors and people that are involved with imports, exports, supply chain.
Yeah, I want to come back to the pharmacy, to the cannabis conversation a little bit later. But when we're looking at your customer base, when you have the newbies who have their first Series A and they're pretty excited after licensing the technology, what are some of the issues that you're dealing with them compared to the more traditional, I've done this before? And clearly there's an educational component to it, and a lot of it deals around documentation and procedures and those kinds of things. But is there a common point that you can say, all right, if I'm a new company, here are the things I'm going to look for initially? And obviously, if it's a more experienced company, I'm assuming it's speed to market and the regulatory piece. They've done this before. What are they missing? You're a set of objective experience size to look at what they're doing.
Right. So I think at that point, it depends on who the foundation of the companies are. If they are science background, then they understand that there are regulatory requirements that have to be met. If they're on the business side, then they are kind of clueless about everything else that's required. So there's, yeah, that was you, yeah. So it's the knowledge of this, to your point, huge amount of requirements, regulatory laws at the state level, at the federal level, and globally, if they're a global company, that have to be encompassed. And not just product related, but there are other laws and regulations that they tend to forget about too. And it's just because you don't know what you don't know. So there are usually a lot of gaps that are recognized pretty quickly that nobody knew to even look at this.
And the primary reason they want to use you is because of your vast experience, the network that you have, the numbers of companies that you've worked with, both currently in your current position as a consultant, but also when you're at FDA and doing those other things. So you know the people making a lot of decisions around the regulatory component, but you also know the people who've gone through this path before. So that value to your customer, to your client, is substantial.
Yeah, it is. And it's a little bit exceptional because a lot of times, particularly in the consulting realm, you will have people from the industry, but it's a bit unusual to get people with the enforcement and industry experience. Or
Mhm.
you get consultants who are out of the enforcement side and they don't have true industry experience.
Right.
So to get the combination, a lot of times I'm told, you're so unique. We never find anybody that knows kind of the inside on the enforcement side, and I still have an extensive network of friends and contacts and colleagues, both at the FDA, Health Canada, and in Europe.
Yeah.
But then also, as you said, have the industry knowledge and contacts as well.
Yeah.
Within Abbott alone, because it's such a huge company, they have so many divisions. I supported all of their businesses across the world.
Oh, wow.
So again, it was a very cross-sectional type of knowledge and experience that was gained to be inside of the industry element.
Wonderful. So, again, this is a very broad question, and I recognize it as such. But what gaps do you fill? And let me start the answer by saying, kind of based on what we just said, this is an opportunity for your client to benefit from your vast experience,
Right.
and it's a quick way to just get third-party view, objective view of where they are and where they need to be to get to that milestone, and you can finish from there.
Right. It is. I mean, one of the first things you notice, particularly with startup companies, is that gap in knowledge and experience with all of the multitude of regulatory requirements.
Mhm.
So they just didn't know what to think about it. And one of the first things I see a lot of times is they're not even aware of all of the state requirements around drugs, devices, and biologics, much
Mhm.
less all of the federal requirements and the different
Mhm.
agencies that they
Mhm.
have to comply with too.
Mhm.
So I think that is the first and biggest thing that pops out is they didn't even know they had to do ABC and they're wanting to be at XYZ and get the product out the door.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just a quick technical question. Where does AI fit into this? It seems like AI is sneaking into a variety of different industries, and from this, I can see where data sets are they developed? Are people using this type of idea, or is it still developing?
Both. It's definitely developing, and the regulatory agencies have got a keen interest in it, obviously, because I
Mhm.
think it is. It's going to be exciting. It's where the future is taking us,
Right, right.
um, in all realms, not just this industry. So there will definitely be regulations around it once they have the understanding and knowledge to write those regulations.
Sure, sure.
But yeah, it will definitely be impactful.
From a layman's business person's perspective, I can very easily see, did you meet these criteria? The algorithms can sniff that out. It does
Mhm.
not address your network and your relationships and those kinds of things. So there's where value is brought in, but it just kind of appears that it may speed the process up to a degree in terms of identifying areas of challenge.
Yeah,
But in terms of connecting and moving it toward market, that's still an area where it doesn't fit so well.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's
Yeah, yeah.
spot on. Right.
And in terms of introducing cannabis to the marketplace, the process is still the same. It's just the fact that it's cannabis that we're talking about.
Yes, yes, it's huge. I mean, you have a social, political, regulatory conflict right now
Mhm.
that has created quite a quagmire for people who are trying to be in that industry and with those products.
Because I know that CBD was something that everyone touted, but there are not a lot of um, tests. I don't think there are formal tests from FDA that says this is what it will do. It's
Right.
just, go for what you know, versus I'm assuming what CBD or what cannabis will go through.
Right, exactly. And there's probably there's a bit more information with the cannabis THC products than there are with
Mhm.
even CBD. And they are definitely in the fact finding mode right now with CBD because of the agricultural bill that was passed that
Right.
legalized hemp products that are at or below the regulatory strength that is allowed, but it's going to be a bit. They already know for any product, when you have an effect, you usually have a side effect, and there are definitely safety concerns that have already been shown and known. So all of that has to be vetted and weighed to be able to write those regulations around these products. So, I mean, we see it. There's products on the market already, but those products are actually not legal yet. So there's no regulatory oversight of all of those products, and it's kind of you take those products at your own risk. There's no oversight yet.
Which kind of leads to a similar product in that same vein with tattoos, I suppose. You were involved in your FDA life with tattoos, and I've reached out to Casey to see if we can get a more thorough discussion around it, but just give us a snippet of that process of looking at tattoos and the regulatory process of them.
Right. It is another industry that people, for the most part, are not aware that all of the color pigments, the dyes that are used, and the instruments, the tattooing needles and barbs, and then the body piercing elements are not legal. They're not approved or reviewed by FDA.
Right.
So it's an illegal process that is obviously everywhere. And right now it is regulated by the states. And at that point, I'll add Texas was the first state to have tattoo and body piercing regulations. And I also have to add, it was something that was welcomed and encouraged by the industry. So it was a little bit unique that they actually wanted it, but it led to some legitimacy for their product and their practices.
The interesting part is the role that tattoos play. Everything from a medical device, is that what it would be called in that application, all the way to social bonding, branding, all that kind of stuff. So that's the part that's so interesting to me.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it obviously has a social aspect to it. Everybody sees them and so many people have them. But the other interesting thing is the medical application. They're used a lot of times to cover scars and, both surgical and birth defects and things like that. So there's a lot of application for it.
Absolutely. So I'm guessing a lot of your work has to do with the lack of documentation, the lack of standard operating procedures, the inability to monitor or to validate cleaning processes. Is that primarily a lot of the initial work that you're doing with some of the companies to ensure that they are following those rules so that it can be documented?
It's definitely the primary element, not just around the cleanliness part of it. That is a huge amount or an important factor in the manufacturing process, particularly depending upon the products that you're making, manufacturing. But there is a very wide scope of requirements that must be met, starting with your R&D activities, all the way then going into your supply chain and supplier quality. You have to have good ingredients, components going into your products. Otherwise, if you don't have that right on the front end, it meets that old adage, bad things in, bad things out. So you've got to have controls and you've got to have good documentation practices, obviously, around all of those elements. Then through the manufacturing, through the packaging, and through your distribution cycle. And then you've got to have the loop and the documentation on the feedback and how you incorporate that back into your full cycle again. It's the life cycle of the product that must be documented and controlled.
And I appreciate that very brief lesson that you gave me. It's like a semester's class in 30 seconds. I appreciate that. But one of the relationships we're developing is with community colleges in the area to provide workforce training, entry-level positions in those spaces where SOPs are the critical component. So I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted that as we come into the conversation. Within the region, and I know this is a hard question because probably most of your work doesn't happen in North Texas, but as you look at the outside world and compare it to North Texas, where are some of the gaps related to the type of work in pharmaceutical manufacturing, medical device development, those kinds of things? What's missing in our region to attract more of that activity here?
Right. It's resources. It is knowledgeable, experienced resources.
Mhm.
And it's a known gap here. It's a known gap nationally, and it's a known gap globally. It's just really hard to get good people that have the knowledge and experience to work within a regulated industry. So you have to have the knowledge of what's required. You have to have the knowledge of how to do it, and you have to have the experience to understand and succeed where there are challenges. And a lot of time, I mean, you just don't see that, particularly with startup companies. But I experience it all the time with some of the very large companies. So it's very significant.
And I think we recognize it. We're excited about the innovation that's created in our universities. And there have been several companies that have been successful, but there's room for more. And if we start looking at the industries where those companies are successful, how can we replicate that success? And right now, I don't know if we're to the point where we can standardize that procedure, but at the meantime, we can at least make those opportunities available for new companies to come to the region and grow. And of course, people like you who provide tremendous services, offer great networking ability that's strategic in their success. So we're excited about that.
Great.
And now comes some of the hard questions related to this. What do you do for fun?
Well, I do a lot of things outdoor. So a lot of outdoor activities, a lot of hiking and biking, and love snow skiing. And obviously with the travel limitations right now, probably not going to get that in this year.
Right.
And then travel. And I travel extensively, or I did travel extensively
Not more.
with my work around the world. But travel in and of itself, I just love it, socially and professionally. And it's just, I find the world and the people just so interesting and so fun. We travel a lot.
Let me press the back rewind button a little bit. So everyone assumes that to get through regulatory fast, you have to start in Europe, take advantage of the EU process, and then once you've cleared that, which is usually quicker or soon to be quicker, you come back to the US to go through FDA. How much of that is true, and does it vary by industry or product?
Right. It is faster, I would say. And so that's why you do see a lot of companies do that to start internationally, not just EU, but some of the other countries as well, and then move to the US. But it's almost a golden stamp if you can get your FDA approval or clearance, if it's a new product or a same or similar kind of product, be it drugs or devices. And then you want to go globally. So it can work both ways, and you see it a lot. But I have to say the approval route is probably faster internationally, and then you come in the US. But again, it's very product dependent. If you can meet a FDA OTC monograph, you've got an over-the-counter product that you can get on the market like that, as long as you're compliant to that. You file and pay your fee, and you're legal. And then you can get your certificate of compliance and go internationally if it fits within their regulatory schemes. So yeah, I see it both.
And the last question is a follow-up to previous conversation is algorithms are now being introduced through the process. Are they defined as a device? How are they defined? And what's your experience or what have you heard about algorithms being regulated?
Right. The experience I've had with them, it's mostly in devices. And so it's an element of the device, and they're considered a component of the device. And there has to be validation of those algorithms and things like that.
Right.
So I tend to try and stay away from those. That's not my premier area of expertise.
Understood.
So, but I know that's how it's been, and that's been my experience as far as the biggest application. But I think you're going to see those algorithms in everything. It's like the artificial intelligence, which is what they are.
Yeah.
It will just build on that, and yeah,
Fascinating stuff.
it is.
Fun.
It's amazing.
This has been a fun. I'm a little smarter now. I now know the areas I need to read up before our next conversation, hopefully. But this has been great, Cynthia. Thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to the next opportunity to visit with you.
The same for me. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. And thanks to everybody for being a part of the conversation today. We thank you very much for joining us. We'll let you know the next opportunity we have for an MIC conversation. Have a good day.